Wait, are you are you gonna count me in? Whatever. I'm just gonna go for it. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and as a child of the 80s, I'd love to say queens rule, but they don't. Queens lead. Being a queen means you are worthy to be a leader of people. The guests on our show do exactly that. They are leading the way in their businesses, families, and communities. And they're taking their rightful place in the spotlight, leading and inspiring the developing queens in all of us. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast.
Now here's your host, Amy Singleton, the queen of realness, leading conversations about business, life, and the real shit you want to know.
Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Queen's Lead podcast. Today we are very, very blessed to be joined by Dr. Sera Lavelle. Now, she is a clinical psychiatrist, has so much knowledge, guys. She's going to help us work through some eating issues that we might have. I don't know if she knows this, but your girl used to be almost 300 pounds myself. So this is going to be a very exciting episode. Welcome, Dr. Sera.
Hi, so great to have me. And no, I didn't know that. Now I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, I'm also currently doing EMDR therapy with my therapist. So like, I need to know all of the clinical background of all of the stuff that we're doing. So tell us who you are and what you do. You're in New York, is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Very fabulous. Very fabulous. I feel like I was born to be in New York. Are you from there originally?
No, I'm from Cleveland originally, and actually,
oh my gosh,
we split our time. I was in New York for a long time. We're spending time in Florida, also in Mexico. So I'm actually pretty nomadic at the moment.
Love
but
it.
I love what I do. My practice is in New York City. So I'm the owner of New York Health Hypnosis and Integrative Therapy. It's the 9 of us. We're all clinical psychologists. We all love integrating hypnosis into therapy. Now we don't just do hypnosis, which is a common misconception, but we do find that the addition of it to therapy actually produces very meaningful results.
Yeah.
In this time, a few of my colleagues ended up learning EMDR, and it's been so eye-opening to see their work that we're actually currently creating a second practice just devoted to EMDR to help people deal with trauma and help us continue to specialize. And then the third thing I do is, since I've been working with eating disorders for 17 years, is I'm launching an app that mixes AI with mindfulness to help people rewire their thinking around food.
I love that. Yeah, rewiring your brain is literally everything. I didn't recognize how powerful that was and how powerful the paths that we have created in our brains over years, decades, how powerful those really are.
Yeah, everybody talks about behavioral changes, right? And I keep thinking, well, how could you make a behavioral change unless you change your mindset?
Yeah. It starts definitely up here for sure. So what got you interested in psychology in the first place?
I've always been drawn to psychology. I remember being 5 years old and actually being the person that friends would come to if they had a problem. And I remember thinking back then, I was like, maybe I want to do this when I'm older. It felt really meaningful to me. And it feels like a privilege that people open up their lives to you and thinking that you can help in some way.
You were like the tiny Lucy on Peanuts, like setting up your stand, therapy, come get your therapy already as a kid, right?
Come get your therapy. Exactly. Exactly. And then I tried out a few different things in undergrad, but psychology is just always stuck. And then once I decided, I ran with it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have something pretty unique because being a product of a lot of doctors and therapy and psychologists and psychiatrists over the years, it's not always been my experience that the psychologist or the doctor was the person providing that therapy.
Very different, exactly. So I'm a psychologist, and then we pair with a lot of psychiatrists, and people often don't realize the difference, right? And the difference is pretty vast, but people will think that the difference is just that psychiatrists will be therapists that also give medication, but it's actually very different. The schooling you get to be a psychiatrist is you're really just schooled in medication. And so your session might be 15 minutes. You're really not doing any therapy.
Right.
Really even getting any training in therapy. A lot of times you'll do
Mhm.
a 4-year MD, and then you might do a psychiatric residency, but then you're learning to prescribe medication, not really for people who might be like me or you, who might have some anxiety, might have some mild depression, might have other issues going on. You're really getting trained in working with people who might be a lot more severe in their diagnoses,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas as a psychologist, you're getting training all those years in a PhD or a doctoral program like PsyD to just do therapy, to analyze, to take your time to figure out what's going on, to try to make change. And then a lot
Yeah.
of times you'll refer out to the psychiatrist because the medication might be a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
But it always baffled my mind how a psychiatrist would work independently of a psychologist or a therapist or someone else doing that mental or physical behavioral work. Like, how are they not more integrated together?
And a lot of times it's not even psychiatrists prescribing medication. Do you know who the number one and number two prescriber of mental health medications are? I mean, it's
Well,
not
I think I do know, but only because I'm a registered nurse by background.
okay,
And so I worked
interesting. I
with a
didn't
lot
know
of,
that.
yes,
Mhm.
I did open heart surgeries for a long time. So my guess, let's guess, let's see. Is
Mhm.
it an OBGYN?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I figured because
OBGYN.
they become our default PCP, right? As women, that's
Um,
who we see. It's like who we have to
exactly.
see. So we just see them for everything.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like, well, while you're here for your annual gynecological exam,
Yeah,
let's talk about your depression, but then you're not seeing that person again for a year.
here,
Where-
right.
Whereas if you're working with a psychiatrist, they're going to be trained so specifically in the right medications. And then you have a 2-week follow-up, and then a month from there, and then you wait until things get stabilized.
Yeah.
Number two, however, is actually pediatricians, but
Wow.
not because they're prescribing to kids.
To the
It's a lot of
parent.
times mothers will won't have time to make their own appointments with their doctors, and they're like, hey, well, while little Johnny's here, actually I've been feeling kind of depressed. Um,
Wow.
or, and then they'll make their own appointment with the doctor, but um, it's a lot of times, not coordinated the way that I think it should, which, if it worked up to me, a person would start by seeing a therapist. And then if the
Yeah.
therapist recommends seeing a psychiatrist, they could recommend somebody they personally know for that specific issue. So it becomes more
Yeah.
special. Hey, you're seeing me for an eating disorder. I probably have that network of psychiatrists that I refer to for an eating disorder that really know the good eating disorder medications, right?
Yeah.
And then you collaborate, the therapist and the psychiatrist, so that you make sure you're seeing the same things.
Yeah.
And the psychiatrist will notify the therapist if something's going wrong with the medication, or the therapist can notify the psychiatrist, hey, I've noticed this since you last seen him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Well, definitely. And coming from a nursing background, I think so many people discount the fact that all their doctors are talking about them together and collaborating on their health. And really, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing most of the time. So if you're out there and you're on medication or you're seeing a therapist and you don't have that other piece of the puzzle, please,
Mhm.
please seek that collaboration for your care. It's really important.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the reason people don't collaborate a lot is because you do need, I can't just call up their psychiatrist. I have
Sure.
to get them to, to give me a consent. So
Yeah.
a lot of times people aren't collaborating because they're like, oh, well, it seems like a lot of work to get the consent from the patient to talk to this doctor, to talk to that doctor. But, a lot of times it makes it easier if they already have that connection, and then you send the
Yeah.
form, and then you could talk from
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's talk about eating disorders because I know, and I wonder if there was an increase during COVID of all of that problem specifically. I know there was in some other
Mhm.
addictive type behaviors. So let's talk to us about eating disorders and maybe why did you go down that specific specialty?
So it's interesting. I feel like the path kind of found me. I definitely think there's an increase. And maybe it's more, it's so I guess I'll start out by saying that I just instinctively feel like most struggles with food aren't a categorical difference, but a difference of degree in than eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
It's we're now becoming more aware of, we'll call it disordered eating, which kind of means like you don't fit the qualifications, but but it's more in terms of, I think, conceptually. We treat weight loss, I think, in this country in a very strange way, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's strange because
Yeah.
shouldn't you be trying to get a person who's a binge eater or somebody who's obese or something, shouldn't we be trying to get them to eat like a healthy person naturally eats? And a person who's naturally thin isn't counting calories, going on keto,
Right.
tracking their food, doing this. That's not what people naturally do. What you find is people who are naturally thin actually have more body awareness. They are better able to identify when they're hungry and they're full. They're better able to say, oh no, if I eat that, I know I won't feel that great. Right. And
Yes.
so, right. And what you'll find is in my time, and of course I'm biased because I'm dealing with a lot of people struggling with food, but
Yeah.
I think it's very rare that somebody, sure, there are times people go to a nutritionist for the education around it, but I've never had a patient say, hey, I need some help. I really don't know if a carrot is fewer calories than a donut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. What they say is, I know it's bad for me, but I felt emotional that day, or I
Yeah.
know exactly how I should be eating, but then I get derailed somehow. Or, I find myself starving myself during the day just so I could splurge later at night. And it's like these kind of games with food. So even if you're not, specifically bulimic or specifically anorexic, or even specifically have binge eating disorder, the thought preoccupation with food, and the like playing games of like, I'm going to try to eat nothing and then I'm going to break down and eat too much, I think is really common in anybody struggling with food. And it's
Yeah.
not that they lack nutritional information.
No, we know what's good and bad. I mean, generally speaking, we definitely know. I mean, like what's more, like you said, what the difference between a carrot and a donut is pretty obvious to most people. Right?
Yeah. But the
Yeah.
weight loss industry makes it sound as if that's the problem. If you look like at like the vast majority of apps out there to help people lose weight are calorie counters,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like they make it sound like it's a problem with math. Right?
Yeah. So
Right.
what is the real problem? I mean, I think I know what you're gonna say, at least generally.
I mean, if I were to put it just in a nutshell,
Yeah.
the real problem is people are desperate to feel better in some way. And what you'll find the common thread is that there's an exaggerated belief about how happy the food will make you feel. Right?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? If I
Yeah.
had to sum it up as one problem, right?
Wow.
So
That's
they'll
so true.
vacillate between feeling like, hey, if I eat nothing, then I'll feel happy because I'll be thin, to being
Yeah.
like, oh, I can't do that. Maybe this food right now in the moment is going to make me happy.
Yeah,
Right?
everyone's seeking some kind of, and this to come from my brain understands this, I think, because I'm an addict, a recovering addict. I'll be sober for
Yeah.
6 years in April. But
Oh,
knowing, thank you. But just knowing that you're seeking some kind of comfort, some kind of, for me, it was like, it was the days when I was like, fuck this, I deserve this.
yep.
I want something, I want to feel something, whether it be
Yeah.
comfort or like I deserved something. It was always coming back to that feeling I was seeking for sure.
Yes, exactly. And half the time people eat it and they're like, oh, that wasn't even that good anyways. Why did I do
Yeah.
that? But
Hmm.
what you find is right before they eat, almost talk about like Plato's form, right? Like, like Plato's form, it's like the idea that there's like a perfect circle out there, a perfect, so when you're
Yeah.
planning for that pizza, it's going to be the perfect pizza. It's going to
Yeah.
be perfectly cooked and perfectly crisp with the right amount of sauce, the right amount of gooey cheese. But it's never going to be as good as you think it is in that moment
Hmm.
before you're about to binge, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the anticipation. It's like going on vacation, right? Like you plan the vacation. The
Yeah.
planning is half the fun, or sometimes more fun than
More
actually
fun with the
experiencing the
actual
vacation.
thing. Exactly. And you build up that plan so much in your mind, and the plan itself gets to be this distraction for the day, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But it never works. But it's a belief over and over that it will, right? So,
Yeah.
you'll find most methods rely on two things right now. CBT and calorie counting of some sort.
Yeah.
Both have actually proven over and over to be ineffective. Three things actually are research-based to be more effective in therapy.
Okay.
So teaching mindful eating actually is successful in eliminating both cravings and reduces frequency of binge eating. Hypnotherapy does actually show long-term change. So when compared to a traditional weight loss program after 12 weeks, they'll find that the hypnotherapy group and the weight loss group will lose the same amount of weight, but the traditional weight loss people will put it back on, whereas the hypnotherapy people will actually continue to learn because it's convinced your mind that you don't need food for comfort, and it teaches you to be aware of how satiety signals. The
Wow.
third thing is motivational interviewing, which is a very specific form of therapy, which helps you question if it's really going to make you happy, what's holding you back from change. So, the combination of these three forms of therapy, they're all kind of more holistic therapies. They're very meaningful and deeper therapies. You'll find that, I hate saying weight loss, but I'm saying eliminating that struggle with food.
Yeah.
Eliminating the disordered thinking around food.
Do you think that most people develop that in childhood just based on how their family dynamic was, or is it the societal things that happen to us later on as young women or grown people?
I'm biased. I don't know if I could say all the research on it, but what I see in practice is it really stems from childhood. A lot of my patients have parents who were pretty controlling around food. And I've noticed this almost like survival deprivation mindset.
Yeah.
That starts a lot of times in, there was a study that showed, children as early as 5 years old want to lose weight, and that's terrifying. I've had a lot of patients. I'm always surprised that parents put them on Weight Watchers at the age of like 10.
I was on Fen-Phen at like 12. Not prescribed to me, obviously, prescribed to my mother,
but she
but
gave
she gave it to me.
Wow.
Yeah, like we were on a diet together, it was a constant struggle in my home, and it really, I know that my parents don't listen to this podcast, so it doesn't matter, but
Well, that's
like,
good.
that's probably a good thing. But no, I just think my parents were just really ill-equipped to, because they weren't raised in a home where health was a value. And I say health because so many things were like surrounded by food, all of our celebrations, obviously food, just like any other family. But it was just a constant cycle of going on diets, crash diets, and then coming off, and then we're going to eat right again, and then we're not, and then we're going to do this thing, and then we're not. And, I really struggled with my weight growing up the whole time
But you're
into
also
adulthood.
But what you're also picking up on is your own mother's self-consciousness about her own image. And that more than anything is going to have a strong effect on you. Is you're seeing her unhappy when she's not thin and that she has to do something drastic. Right.
Yeah. And it was always about the number as well, the number on the scale. Even today, like she'll come up to me like, oh, I'm down to 145 or I'm this or that, or what, what are you weighing? And it's so much of an obsession.
Yeah. I wrote a blog on whether or not you should weigh yourself. Right.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because it's a big question. Should we weigh ourselves?
Yeah.
And it's not an easy answer. It's I think if you're a person who's like in denial of your weight and it's like you haven't stepped on a scale for years because you're too afraid to actually confront that number, I do think stepping on it maybe monthly, could be a good thing. But when we micromanage it that way, women can gain up to 6 pounds of water weight when they're ovulating and when they're premenstrual. So what you work with an eating disorder patient, all of a sudden they're stepping on the scale every day. They see that 6 pound wage. They don't want to eat for days because now I need to lose this. And body weights just fluctuate. You weigh less in the morning than you do at night. It's and people get really preoccupied with it. So I think for most people, actually, you shouldn't step on the scale. There are times.
How do you feel? How do you feel?
Yeah.
So much goes back to just, I think back to my nursing days, and like, it was some of the questions that the physicians would ask whenever a nurse would call to tell them patient, like, here's what their lab, here's what their blood pressure is. Are they symptomatic?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening to them because of that number, that value that we've gotten back on the lab, or the blood pressure or the pulse? Is the body symptomatic? Are they having trouble because of that? Is that
Yeah.
a better gauge of how to know if you're healthy, or how to, at a good weight?
Well, right now, do you know if you are?
Healthy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm healthier than I've ever been.
Okay. How do you know?
Well, my recent lab, my
Okay.
my weight, the way I'm sleeping, the way I feel, my
Okay.
mood,
Okay.
my muscles are getting stronger,
Okay.
There
Okay.
are some physical and some
Yeah. I mean, we should,
physiological and mental signs, I guess.
yeah, we should get, I mean, we should always get the labs. However,
Yeah.
I feel like with all these tracking devices out here, everything, it's, I have a theory that it psychologically makes us um distrust our own gauges more. The more we rely
Mm,
on anything outside of ourselves, the more we're systematically learning to ignore how we feel. So you start out
yeah.
sad, but then when we got into it, you started saying, oh, how my clothes fit, how I feel, I have more energy. And I think most people, if you just ask them, do you know if you're on track or not right now? They'll
Yeah.
be able to say yes, no, or kind of. And then they have
Mhm.
to think about why, like what evidence they have. But we
Mhm.
instinctively know.
Yeah. So you think the watches, the tracking, you see, I don't wear one. I got a Fitbit and then I gave it to my husband because I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It
Yeah.
wasn't for me. But
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder about these devices like the Whoop that tells you and helps you with your sleep and all those things. Like, could I be doing better? Would a device help me? You're
Yeah.
saying no.
Well, I think you could use it for a limited time to get like kind of like a baseline.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
like it for those reasons, right? Like
Okay.
to kind of like diagnose but then after that, I think if you wear them long term, you are going to just learn to rely on them. And
Yeah.
it almost becomes a philosophical question, right? If you
Right.
feel good, if you
Yeah.
feel good, but this says you feel bad, who's right, right?
Crap, I'm supposed to be feeling bad right now. I haven't got all my
Yeah.
steps in today. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
can
do think
definitely
in a
see that.
beginning phase of trying to get into your health, understanding those things. I'm a very big fan of actually a person spending some time figuring out their blood sugar levels,
Yeah.
because that awareness could help more, right? Some people are binging when their blood sugar is really low and they don't realize that. And actually
Mm.
just having like a small amount of like almost like a diabetic candy can
Mhm.
actually stabilize that, as opposed to then just binging.
Yeah.
Having that kind of awareness, but do you need to wear that for the next like 10 years? You
Yeah.
do if you're diabetic and you need but if you're just somebody who might be a little bit sensitive to blood sugar issues, maybe it's just a good starting point.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So where does the hypnosis come in your process?
Mhm. In working with patients?
Yeah.
So it comes at different points. I almost always say I tend to do it in the first session with a patient just because they're coming to us for a reason. They want to see, is this something, that I want to try? Is this something that I like the feeling, right? So in a first session, I might do like a 15-minute hypnotherapy, which is a lot more like guided meditation than people really
Okay.
realize. It's
Hmm.
just,
I was gonna say, like, what is it like? Does it work on everybody? What is it really like? I mean, is it
yeah,
like the magician who's like making someone bark on a stage, all this brain stuff?
yeah. That specifically is called stage hypnosis.
Yeah.
And I actually wish it didn't exist because it's so different than what we do that it's like
Yeah,
a
I
huge
bet.
different name, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is more like using a variety of tech. It's using guided meditation, but guided in a very specific way to help you to get into a relaxed state. I
Hmm.
don't see so much difference in people's experience doing it that way. Whereas stage hypnosis only works about 5% of the population. And it's
Wow.
more, the hypnosis is more convincing themselves that they're not really just doing it because they want to. The first
Hmm.
screening when you see a stage performance is who's raising their hand the most. You know,
Yeah.
you're seeing who's willing to go along with it, right?
Right.
Whereas hypnosis in everyday life is just think about how meaningful it is. If you're trying to change your eating habits or change your drug habits or changing something meaningful in your life, when do you
Yeah.
actually even get a chance to close your eyes for a half an hour and like admit to yourself how much you want to change?
Mm,
And it's that moment to do that. Right?
yeah. Taking the time.
Right.
What are your thoughts on, now this is a brand new thing in Oklahoma. In fact, one of my clients is the first owner of this machine. It's the theta machine
I
that's
don't,
inducing theta waves.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's not FDA approved or anything, but it's a machine. It looks like a giant tanning bed. Got oral, visual, and then so you put on headphones, you put on eye goggles that have certain light patterns and certain ear patterns, and
Mhm.
then the machine itself spins you in a certain way, right or left. And I mean, they're using it
Yeah.
for PTSD, weight loss, smoking, and it's because of that. I think I heard you say like relaxing that brain into that certain state, and
Yeah.
supposedly puts you into theta wave state
Yeah.
and
Which is
helps to
like in
rewire
that
the brain.
state. Yeah. I mean, I would rather people, it's that's what you're doing with the ketamine therapy. It's what you're doing with all these different therapies.
Is
It sounds
it? Okay.
natural than doing that. Um,
Mhm.
I find that very interesting because I do
Yeah.
think there's something very meaningful about just being in that state. And we've been trying to
Mhm.
do it for centuries, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of like famous inventors, Thomas Edison, they had this technique where they would hold a ball in their hand while they were writing down their different ideas, so that when they fell asleep, it would like wake them up a little bit if they dropped it. And they would try to stay in this prolonged kind of half awake, half asleep state. So
Yeah.
is this natural way that we know that being in the state is like a very powerful place. Um,
Mhm. And
our
that's kind of the state that the hypnosis is inducing?
yeah, and that kind of theta, it sounds like it's inducing. I would rather people do something like that than I think that's why people are drawn to drugs. We want to be in this different state.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
right? And if you could do it naturally through something like that, it sounds promising to me.
Yeah.
I
Try
don't
some Wim Hof breathing, people.
uh
Get
well,
high on your own supply.
people always ask like, hey, since you do hypnosis, aren't you really into the psychedelic therapy and the ketamine therapy and I'm not against any of it if it's done in a
Mhm.
professional way. But my answer is always the same. I simply just don't need it. I can put myself
Right.
in any altered state I want. Like,
Mhm. Yeah, and that's so powerful. Like people ask all the time. I mean, I used to be on about 34 different medications at one time for
all
lupus,
prescribed?
all prescribed. Lupus,
Wow.
rheumatoid arthritis. I'd broken my back, so I was on a slew of pain medicine,
Mm.
tons of stuff for autoimmune, loads of mental health meds, and I was so much worse off than I am now. I take a handful of things for like hormones, things I have to take
Mhm.
because of my previous health. But I fully believe that between my 2 ears has been the biggest difference in my health shift,
Yes.
whether it be mental, physical, even my lupus, and things like my labs are clearing up all the time,
Isn't that
and
amazing?
I'm taking less and less and less medication.
The association between depression and lupus is a really complicated one that I've seen, right?
Really.
Are people depressed because of lupus or is their depression contributing to it? Now, I don't want to make it sound, I don't want people to feel like I'm saying, oh, you have lupus, that's your fault if you just aren't
Yeah.
depressed. It's
Yeah.
not,
No.
it's not like that, but I've seen that a lot, the association
Mhm.
between the two of them. And my guess is
Yeah.
that each affects the other.
Absolutely. But the better you can take care of your depression, like for me, I was seeking out all these online support groups and people to talk about my disease process with and get advice from. And that was great for like this long. And then I realized that everything in those groups was just reinforcing what I thought might be wrong with me,
Mhm.
having
Exactly.
me have this weird obsession to name, like, oh,
Mhm.
my hand hurts. Is that my lupus or is that my RA? What is
Mhm.
it that's bothering me? What is it that's inside me? I had to cut that shit out. Like it was
Mhm.
horrible for my brain.
And you see the same thing if people label themselves as I have, I have depression, but not just that, I am depressed. This is,
Yeah.
and again, so one thing I like about hypnosis is we don't pretend to not give a diagnosis, right? Diagnosis could
Mhm.
be helpful for people. Hey,
Sure.
it makes sense how I'm feeling this cluster of symptoms, right? Where
Yeah.
in hypnosis, you're using the language, right? we won't have a person focus on feeling depressed. We'll say, you'll spend a lot of focus on, well, how would you like to feel? Let's envision a different feeling that you'd like to feel that. And let's focus on getting you to feel that way. Because how long can you sit there and be like, I'm depressed, I have these negative thoughts, I have this. Okay, well, let's think about some positive thoughts you'd like to have.
Yeah.
Right. And you're really doing a lot, like in hypnosis, you call it reframing. You're really doing a lot of reframing.
Okay.
Right. I have
Yeah.
lupus is even different than saying I have a rash right now. I'd like my rash to get better. Right. Right?
Man,
Not,
it's
I
so
have lupus,
powerful.
there it goes again. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
such a completely different way to think about things. Um, I was going to ask you a question about, so the EMDR, how can you explain? I think that this has been a very big topic lately. I don't think a lot of people really understand what it is. So can you just start off by defining what that even means to
Yeah.
people?
So I'll be honest, that I will do my best on it. So
Yeah, it's hard, right? Like, it's kind of
well,
weird.
not just that, like I'm not the expert in it. We're
Yeah.
creating a second practice because I've actually done EMDR therapy myself.
Okay.
I've been on the other side of the couch, is what I always
Okay.
say,
Nice.
so I
Did
was
it
on
work?
very much so. It was the
Okay.
most therapy I've ever done. And as a therapist who's tried every form of therapy,
Mhm.
looking at things through a trauma lens is so much more helpful. It also gets out of that diagnosis, right? Instead of
Mhm.
saying, oh, you're anxious. Well, actually, maybe you're having a very normal trauma response.
Yeah.
Right. So I got into EMDR because actually one of my colleagues came to me and said, hey, I love hypnosis, but I'm not great at it. I'm kind of curious to learn a different form of therapy. And I said, well, have you thought about EMDR? And she's like, yeah, I have been thinking about that. And I said, well, let's explore that together. She got so into EMDR and I saw her starting to work with her patients. I'm like, well, I actually need this. So then
Wow.
EMDR as a patient, while she was learning EMDR in our practice, now she's really taken off on it. Training other people in our practice, helping getting them the training, which is she's the one inspiring me to help them grow this other practice, but I don't practice it myself. Not that I don't want to, but I'm
You're just
more,
so good at the hypnosis, you don't need to, right?
well,
Again, you don't
yeah.
need to.
Well, I'm also at a point in my career that I'm not taking so many new patients. I'm really in a point
Yeah.
in my career that I want to help
Right.
inspire. I want to be doing my app. I want to help the other therapists in my practice figure out who they want to be as therapists. I want to, inspire, like help these people grow in their EMDR.
That's that queen leadership right there, helping others. Want to bring
Go.
others along to their full potential. Oh,
Mhm.
I love that. I got chills when you said that. So good.
Well,
So
that's what I
good.
love. I love when a person who like finally figures out who they are as a therapist, right?
Yeah.
But I'm so as far, like my understanding of it is, the body really stores trauma as if it's still happening.
Mm.
And it might sound woo woo and it's more complicated than this, but by remembering the trauma and at the same time moving your eyes, you're almost kind of releasing the trauma. Now that's definitely an oversimplification of it.
Sure.
But what I can say is going through it, and what you'll see in practice is you'll see somebody going from saying something like, I was molested by my father, this means I'm damaged, to saying something like, I remember it happened. He's obviously got something wrong with him, but it doesn't really mean anything about me. Um,
Mm.
and they'll even be like, oh, it's like watching a movie. It doesn't, yeah, it's upsetting, but it doesn't trigger them and make these distorted, like it helps these distorted beliefs that arise because of the trauma go away.
Mm.
Right. Because
God,
that's
you're
what
so
happens,
right.
right?
Yeah.
The fact that this thing
Yeah.
happened to you, but the fact that you feel like you're dirty because of it, or that it was like something about you that made it happen.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the most perfect. You did really well because I'm also, like I said, I'm undergoing it myself. And that is, I wasn't sure what to expect at first. Like, am I just going to forget that these things happen? Like, like you can't forget these things, but I'm noticing as time goes on and we really only have to do it once or twice, like one session.
Yeah.
And then like, and actually the week of that sometimes is a little hard. Like it'll come up a little
Mhm.
bit. And then
Yeah.
I recognize back like a month ago, the things we were talking about together a month ago, I'm like, yeah, that happened. yeah, my cousin was really screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like, that's it. It's like,
You're kind of like, yeah, they just had some issues.
yeah,
Not, hey, I
I feel
think I
better.
invited it. I think this, I think that. You're just like, yeah,
Yeah,
something was going on with that guy.
yeah, that was messed up. That was a messed up situation, but here I am today,
Yeah, but here
doing
I am
great.
today. Yeah.
That's, yeah,
Something really interesting we're doing in our practice is the technology is getting interesting because during the pandemic, so many people had to go to remote, and all these
yeah,
interesting technologies came up in response to it. So we use something called remote EMDR, and it's just like right now we have this camera. As the therapist is sitting here talking, or if they're doing the session remotely, you get the bilateral stimulations, but by ear and by sight. So it goes on the screen from like ding, ding, ding. So it more thoroughly stimulates the brain with the eye movements. It's the visual and the auditory, but it also helps the therapist stay present for the person because they can continue to talk without having to think about their hand movements, right?
yeah, yeah.
And we're noticing a lot of change with that.
That's incredible. Speaking of the technology, you mentioned your app and some AI integration. So tell us all about your app. What's it called and what's it for?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's not launched yet. Right now we're in beta and it's been a work in process, but I'm so excited to launch it. We are hoping early in the year. So it's a fully functional app right now. We're working out some bugs, but it's called Bia Better Eating. And the exactly what I was saying, almost every app works the same way. You restrict, you count calories, you maybe have a coach that like creates a meal plan for you. But it doesn't really work. The drop-off rate for those apps is 97% in the first week.
Really?
So
Wow.
you'll notice they all say the same thing. They're like, oh, after 2 months, you'll do great. Well, if only 3% of people stay on it,
Yeah.
who's it, and for me, the worst part about that isn't the fact that, oh, it's a shame it doesn't work. It's actually 97% of people are left feeling like failures. What's wrong with me? I can't stay on this.
Yeah.
Well, most people can't, right?
Yeah.
So this is, I call it kind of like AI meets Headspace.
Okay.
So what's interesting is it's not just ChatGPT. We've done a lot to train the AI. So we've loaded every blog I've ever written and into it, every podcast, everything I've written. Like I talk to it all the time and load new information all the time. So it's learned
Yeah.
to talk like me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying, it instills 3 different principles: hypnotherapy, mindful eating, and motivational interviewing. And it walks you down these different journeys, teaching you to think about food differently. So we have the open chat, which you could just ask it anything, and it's just going to challenge you. And you could go anywhere with this, right? Like, hey, should I be eating sugar? Should I not be eating sugar? Should I do this? Should I do that? Hey, I'm having a bad day. What should I do? Like anything, right? That's the unstructured path. But then it's got 3 main components that are still AI built into it. But the first is knowledge. So it's equipping you with knowledge of how to listen to your body, how to know what foods feel good to you, how to stop eating when you're full, how to make sure every choice is conscientious. That's the knowledge path. And it changes and grows as you grow. Then there's the motivation path. The motivation path is the one you do if you're like, wow, I really feel like binging right now. I've had a bad day. I'm about to eat this donut. I know I shouldn't, but I want to. It's that screw it mentality.
Let me
And
call my sponsor with the Be a Better Eater app.
yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
love
much.
it.
And it says,
Yeah.
if you want the donut, well, let's rate how much you actually want it. Okay,
Okay.
now let's do an exercise. Let's visualize how you're going to feel if you do it. Let's visualize how you'll feel if you don't do it. And then it gives you a 1-minute mindfulness exercise. And there's like the motivation part is like a lot of different exercises that are made to intervene in that moment.
Okay.
Right. And then the third aspect of it is called meditation. But there are specific hypnotherapy scripts that we've created in our practice that you can listen to at any time of day, either when you're feeling like you're about to binge or at night when you want to relax, but they're all created to retrain your mind to think differently about food. So
Nice.
what we're seeing in our immediate results is really promising. I can't wait to launch it to the public and actually get like a large scale of like how people are reacting to this. It's such a different model than what's out there right now.
Completely. So will this be available for purchase to anybody, or is
Yep.
it free? What's going to be the
Yeah.
model?
So it's gonna, yeah, the model, we're actually, we want it to be very accessible.
Yeah.
So when it launches, so there'll be a free forever. And it'll
Mhm.
just have limited functionality if you just want to keep it free forever.
Yeah.
We'll have a small upgrade fee that you can continue to use all the features. So no matter what, it's free for this first 2 weeks.
Mhm.
After the first 2 weeks, you can either upgrade for full functionality for only $1.99 when we start out with, when we
Wow. Yeah.
launch. We want it to be very accessible, and we want it,
Mhm.
it's also, there'll be more features in the future. There'll be a
Yeah.
dashboard, that'll be like more interactive. So in the beginning stages, we want to keep it very accessible.
Mhm.
So it's either going to be free forever in the beginning, or you just upgrade for $1.99 and you continue using all the functionality. If
Awesome.
people want to pre-register now, they could go to beabettereating.com. So that's just BEA, better, BETTER, and then eating, EATING.com. They could sign up to be notified, and then they'll be on the list to hear as soon as she's ready to go.
Awesome. I love that. Something like that would have been so helpful for me way back when my journey was beginning, and really training, that's been the biggest thing, is just retraining myself on um choices, like what are my choices? Like pausing for a moment, and really as well, just kind of, my husband and I really just follow like the 80/20 rule, like it's okay to have that donut,
Yeah.
sometimes, like, but
Mhm.
make a conscious choice of it, right?
A
Not just
conscious choice.
random. That's right.
I woke up this morning, I promised myself I was only eating keto, and now I'm having 10 donuts.
That's
It's
right.
very different than being like, hey, I allow myself like things that are a little bit more indulgent a few times a
That's
week,
right. That's
right?
right. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you can actually, what I've found is that I enjoy it so much more when I'm eating that donut, when I get the one a week I get at church or wherever it is that I go, and I savor that thing, because I know I'm giving this to myself as a reward that I consciously chose. I'm not sitting at home in my bedroom eating a whole box of these and feeling bad about it.
Exactly. Because if you feel bad
Right.
about it, it's a net negative experience. So
Right. Like,
never
geez,
really
if you're gonna have it, please
enjoy it.
enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's when, I used to be the person that rolled my eyes so hard at those stupid memes like, anyone who ever said feeling thin doesn't feel as good at whatever, never ate a
Oh,
donut. But no, feeling healthy feels so good. It really does. It feels so much better.
yeah, exactly. Also, feeling on track mentally feels good.
Yeah.
Not just feeling
Yeah.
thin, not just
Right.
feeling like I put my head on the pillow today, knowing that I made choices that I feel good about. Whether that
Right.
choice is that I ate a donut today or I ate, but like knowing that everything I did today was in line with my intentions,
That
that feels good.
that
That
does feel so
feels
good.
better than eating 10 donuts and then regretting it tastes, right?
That's right. 100% every time. God, I was gonna say something and I forgot. Um, yeah, so good. So good. Thank you so much for this experience. You're so great. Um, I wish I could remember what it was I was going to ask you toward the end there.
Sometimes it comes back
Almost
around.
out of time. Maybe it'll come back. We're almost out of time. I think you have a freebie for our listeners. Is that right? Do you have to work in or live in New York to work with you and your team?
So we are all clinical psychologists. So, we follow the laws
Yeah.
very strictly, right?
Yeah.
A lot
Right.
of people don't. They think, hey, I'm in California. Could I just see a therapist in New York if it's virtual? But no, we're
Right.
not licensed in that state, although one of us is.
Yeah.
Um, so for the most part, everybody in all of New York State. However, most of our therapists are also licensed in Florida. One is in California, and three of them are in New Jersey as well.
Okay.
So, you could go to our site. And if you're not sure, you could always ask. But if you go to our site for our therapy site, New York Health Hypnosis, that's just nyhealthhypnosis.com. You can just book a free consultation right on the site. We even have a HIPAA compliant text message. So there's a button you could actually text us a quick question if you want, and it's all
Nice.
HIPAA compliant. You don't have to worry about patient information.
That's
But
awesome.
we're always available to talk specifically to, we always have a therapist and doing consultations. That way you can get into more depth. And then what we do is the therapist who does that initial talk with a person will say, hey, you're dealing with this and that. the best therapist in our practice for is really this person, and they'll really match you with who,
That's great.
they feel like, hey, you have an eating disorder and also trauma. This person does EMDR and works with emotional eating. Or your person, hey, you have OCD and skin picking. We'd really recommend that you work with this person.
Okay. Yeah,
Right? So
that's
we're
a
not
big deal.
it's
Choosing
all-
someone, just looking through like the book of your insurance or going online to try to choose someone is such a hard decision to make in the first place. That I appreciate that you guys do that. That's incredible. So guys, go over, I remember what I was going to say. The body awareness you were talking about, and I don't want this episode to go so long, but you're just so great and full of wonderful information.
I'm having fun.
So good, me too. So what's interesting about what you were talking about earlier is that people with higher body awareness just do make better choices and these sort of things. I really feel like, I don't know if it was like the chicken or the egg, but when I was at my highest weight, I didn't feel aware of anything happening in my body. Not really. Like I could tell you when a new hair sprouts under my armpit now. Like I fully know this body like so well. And it's just, I don't know if it was a progression of the weight loss or the mindset or like, just becoming physically smaller or what it was, but what happens psychologically there?
There's so much. I mean, like, it is very, I'm guessing that you have a history of trauma, right? I mean, people with a history of trauma, it really cuts off their body awareness because they physically had to escape their bodies, and become unaware of them. So it's not uncommon for people to lose body awareness through any kind of trauma, especially if it's any kind of sexual trauma. There was the story, and there's stories of people actually becoming really uncomfortable once they understand that they do have a body. The other thing is, I think people have been systematically taught not to listen to their body, right? So you take something like Weight Watchers, and they're getting a little better with like fullness points and stuff, but like, let's say traditional Weight Watchers, you get this many points. So if you get this many points and you're still hungry, you starve. If you have that many points and you're full, but you have leftover, you're going to eat. You are systematically teaching yourself not to listen to your body. And so I think there's a combination of a lot of trauma in our culture and a lot of being systematically taught to ignore what our body tells us. So when we become healthier, we start to listen to our bodies more. And whether that's recovering from trauma or like trying to undo the messages we've been taught. But yeah, you'll find, it's making people more aware of their bodies again, how it feels.
Wow. It feels so good. Thank you for championing this work for people. It's so needed. And I know I have found such a better life on the other side of awareness of my thoughts and my mind than I ever had before.
It sounds like you've been on an incredible journey. Like it sounds like you've done a lot. Like
it's been a lot of work. Completely worth it.
But what's the alternative?
That's right. Yeah. Die in a hole. I don't know. Wanted to die lots of years ago. Thank God I didn't make that choice.
I always say it's like, sometimes somebody threw us down a well and it's hard to get out, but what choices do you have?
That's right. I always go back to that movie, the Catch Me If You Can, the Leonardo DiCaprio and his dad's telling, and those two little mice, they churned that butter and they crawled out. They thrown into a bucket of milk, and all the rats died, but the one little rat kept moving around so much he churned that butter and he crawled out of the pot.
Churn that butter.
Churn that butter. That's right. All right. Well, anyone who is in New York, California, New Jersey, or Florida might have the chance to have these wonderful people as your helpers and your guides. But if not, you can all get on the waiting list at beabettereater.com. Did I get that right?
Be a better eating. Yeah.
Be a better eating. Sorry. beabettereating.com. Go get that app and just become more aware of yourself. Whenever it launches, I can't wait to download it and put it to work.
I'll send you the link myself when it does.
Yay.
Thank you so much for having me today. It was really fun.
Thank you for being my guest. And thank you for being a queen that leads.
The Queen's Lead podcast is recorded worldwide and produced by the kick-ass media team at the Hype Digital home base in Nicaragua. Until our next episode, stay real, Queens, and go lead. Remember to tap that follow and leave your review. For freebies and more real, inspiring content you love, go to amysingleton.net and connect with Amy on her socials at @TheRealAmySingleton.
One more thing. This is the legal language, what my lawyer wrote and what I need to read to you. This podcast is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am Amy Singleton, and I'm just your friend. Although I may speak to many on this show, I am not a psychotherapist, a business coach, a doctor, a CPA, a lawyer, or probably anyone who should be giving you professional advice. This podcast is not a substitute for a relationship with your doctor, coach, or any other licensed professional. Got it? Good. Now go be a queen and follow me at The Real Amy Singleton.